Everybody, to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager for HGA, and I get to be your host today. Today's episode of Textile and Tea is sponsored by the Handweavers Guild of Bellingham, Washington, in memory of Leslie Comstock. We welcome your questions, and we will try to answer as many as we can toward the end of the program. We ask that you use the Q&A button and not the chat. The questions get lost in chat, so use that Q&A button and send those questions in. Today, we have Denise Kovnat as our guest. Denise began weaving in 1998. She's been teaching throughout the US, Canada, Australia. She focuses mostly on parallel threadings, collapse weave, painted warp, and deflected double weave. She's been in the Convergence fashion show since 2008. She has won awards from the Handweavers Guild of America, Complex Weavers, and the Seattle Weavers Guild. She blogs about weaving and fiber arts on her website, denisekovnat.com. Welcome, Denise.
Hello, Kathy. How are you?
It's so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we have to ask you the first question. What is your favorite tea?
Earl Grey, of course.
Why, of course?
Because I think it's everybody's favorite, isn't it?
I want to ask, how did you get started in weaving?
Oh, I'd love to answer that question. I've heard so many weavers say the same thing. Of course, as a kid, 5 years old or so, I was knitting. My grandmother was blind and she was a knitter. She knitted garments and patterns. And my mama and my grandma and my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Grabowski, taught me how to knit. And, I majored in knitting in college. No, I joke. That's not true. But, that knitting in college came and went. But the weaving aspect, and I think so many people can relate. I had a job, and I was working, and it was in advertising like you. And I was taking a photography course. I was 25. And I walked by this window in our local museum where all the classes were, and it was a weaving studio. And it was just one of those, it wasn't like, it was a big thing, but it was like, I'm going to do that someday. I want to make those beautiful pieces of wood work. I can make those work. And so, time went on, how this goes, jobs, family, kids, and my kids became teenagers, and I quit work. I was thinking, I'd always said to my husband, I think I'll take a weekend and learn weaving. Or I think I'll take a week. Well, I started taking a course at the museum with Joyce Robards, who is still my weaving mother. I hope she's listening. She would have had to have me at 15, but that's okay. She's my weaving mother. And I kept studying for 4.5 years with her and had so that was 1998. Got hooked, saw the equipment. Sometimes with people, it's saw a weaving, I want to do that. It was like that.
Well, what impact do you think that your previous jobs, your career has had on you as a weaver?
I like to think, Kathy, that, I was an editor and a writer, but I worked for the University of Rochester magazine for the last 12 years of that, my job for 21 years. I was trained in journalism and English literature. So it's not so much, I think it's the aesthetics of what I was doing visually. No, I think it was just the opposite. I wanted to do something visual. I'd been writing words for so long, and I used to have this daydream of being on a sailboat that had a name, Away with Words, Away with Words. And I would just do something utterly visual. But so weaving appeals to me because it's a wordless language. It's a form of self-expression that can't be put into words, you know? But on the other hand, my background helps me in teaching because you have to be clear. I like to think that I can describe clearly what needs to be done. Weaving is so difficult to put into words. It's really hard. So I like to think, even though I struggle with that all the time, that I can communicate fairly clearly because that's my background.
Oh, that's amazing.
Not really, but I try.
Yes.
You know, it sounds good. Yeah, I
All right,
learned the
well,
importance. Yeah, of
let's
images.
imagine it's 5 or 10 years from now, and the Museum of Modern Art has decided to do a retrospect on your work. Would you or the people viewing be able to say, oh, this work was before COVID, and then this work is after COVID hit? Would there be a
Um,
difference?
you know, um, I think in quantity there would be a difference. You know, I don't know if you've seen this meme on Facebook where when COVID hit, one woman posted it and it said, Weavers, we've been training for this all our lives, right?
Right.
So all of a sudden, I mean, I remember I was getting ready for Convergence to teach at Convergence, and you know, there's usually a rush. I'm going to do, you know, 50 samples and I have to have them ready. Well, all of a sudden it's like, well, Convergence wasn't canceled quite that quickly, but when it was like, oh, and I just wove and wove and wove. And it really, so I think quantity, BC and AC, right? Before COVID and after COVID, there's a lot more quantity. But again, I like to think there's a lot more quality. I like to think I've grown a lot in my weaving since then. Yeah. So I don't know if you could tell, you know, but
Well, it sounds like you could tell.
yeah, on good days, on bad days, I'd say, no, not at all, you know.
Well, you've switched to online teaching fairly early. You kind of took off with that. What was the transition like from teaching live to face to an online kind of teaching? What was
You
that
know,
like for you?
this could be a discussion in and of itself. I could take all, you know, we could take an hour on this, any of these questions actually, but this one in particular, because weaving is a very touch. It's, you know, it's all about texture. It's all about touching, and that's gone from an online course, right? So when I first started doing it, I thought, look, it was a rush to not a rush emotionally. It's a hurry to either cancel all my courses or transition to online. And I'd worked with someone, Bets Frederick. I bet you Bets is listening too. Shout out to Bets. About 4 years ago, she said, will you teach me a workshop on Skype? And I was like, say what? And she's an educator who does distance learning all the time. For her, that was nothing. So that's kind of showed me that it could be done. We did a dyeing workshop together. So I was like, this is half a loaf, you know, but it is way better than not teaching or not being in touch with the weaving community. So it was sort of like I wanted to do it. So I figured out how to make it work. And then there were other people all along the way. You know how this is with the weaving community. Paula Bernstein, who's in Illinois with the Prairie Guild, I believe, had been at Bell Labs, and she said, "Let's do this. Let's do our workshop online. We will practice and practice, and we will get this right." And it was great, but there have been some hysterical things along the way. I mean, we were having our floors done, so I moved my studio upstairs on top of my sewing machine, and I was giving a Zoom class for free for our local weaving center. And I crossed my legs and knocked the plug out of the computer, and the whole and I turned on my phone and I could hear them. I could hear everybody going, "What? Wait a minute, what happened?" Wait, and you know, I got back on, but and then there've been times when my computers crashed, just crashed. but people are so eager to maintain community. So I think there's some real learning curves with, Google Drive and Zoom and
Yep.
all of that. But in the end, you get to meet. There've been some upsides that were amazing. You know this for us because all of a sudden you can hop on. You can take 3 workshops in a week if you want. I had one woman who was doing that. So
I think that we're going to have more and more stories about what happened on Zoom and, the cats walking across the screen and that kind of things.
Oh yeah. Husbands banging around in the kitchen. I mean, in the background. Yeah, there's
Right.
that.
Well, let's talk some about your work. Now, many artists focus either on structure or they focus on color. And you choose very complex weave structures that incorporate colors, such as this work that's coming up. It's called Summer Lease. Which do you think more important to you, is the color or the structure?
I'm going to have to say both, Kathy, because one informs the other, right? I mean, if you look at the photo on the right, it's Shrep. Remember Janet Phillips talking about the shadow weave rep link? It's actually, this is more rep wise, I guess, but look at how bold those forms are, right? Which then allows you to express what are, they're not complementary, but they're very contrasting colors, right? As they travel through the warps. So I would say it's got to be both. That's the beauty part of weaving. How form allows us to express color in all sorts of nuanced ways, but there's also texture. That's another subject. That's to me the third leg of the stool,
Oh, okay. Right. Colored
Even if
structure
it's
and
just
texture.
the
Yeah.
luster, the luster of a yarn in a satin weave or something is, there's a, I think our eyes experience that as texture as well. Does that sound? Yeah, kind of.
Well, your work's been in a lot of exhibits, and especially this beautiful shawl called Pagoda. And I think this was in Complex Weaver Show in 2020. And did you find that once you started entering shows, you started designing differently or weaving differently with the idea of a show coming up?
Yeah, I think that's very true because I'm going to go back to HGA again because there's a woman, Joan Berner. You know Joan. She teaches, and she had been with the Rochester Guild. I'm going to claim her for a while. And I stopped at her studio when she had not made the move to North Carolina. And she said, "Yeah, look at this. That coat was in the Convergence fashion show." And it was this gorgeous blue, she dyes very beautifully, blue mohair. And I was like, it was what? And I thought, I'm going to aim at that target. I know someone who got in it. This is possible. So to answer your question, I determined right away for the Convergence fashion show, big and bold. It's got to be a coat. Oh, it should be a wedding dress, for Pete's sake, an opera coat. It's got to be good for the runway. I mean, and so when I start to think about, I aim for those. That's a challenge I set myself. Convergence fashion show every 2 years. And I get some clunkers and I get some good ones, but it's always, I'm going to do that. I'm going to aim at that target. So for those, I'm thinking bright colors, large garments, and I mean large like a coat or a jacket or a long vest, something with drama. For the complexity show, complex weavers, I always wanted to be in that, and I kind of got my courage up, once I just kind of got my courage up, yeah. And so I had this skein. This is going to sound really weird, but should I yak on and on about this because it's a long story, Kathy?
We're here for an hour.
You can just go like this.
Okay,
All right, there was a skein of yarn. I got it from a beloved friend who passed away, Joy Duskin, in the Weavers Guild of Rochester, and she it was undegummed silk still in the gum, right? From
wow.
Habu, like, oh, and I had a couple skeins of this, and I'd sat there because I didn't know what to do with it. I had never degummed silk. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I love silk, but this was real silk, Kathy. This is the stuff that does not break. It's right from the cocoon. And so a friend, Deb Kaplan from the Boston Guild, said, I can help you. And we sat there. I'm dropping names because I'm hoping they're listening. Molly McLaughlin's house in New Hampshire, and stirring this pot and all this, Saracens coming out. And I had to weave with it. Well, I had a pattern that I developed on Fiberworks. You can go deep diving into Fiberworks for, hours upon hours. And I finally came upon a pattern that is genuine Shrep. It's not shadow weave, it's not rep, but it's something like that. 12 shafts. And I'd always wanted to do it. And Kathy, I broke a solemn vow. I did not sample. No sampling, nothing. And I dyed that, and it looked to me like Disney colors. It's right here. I thought, okay, now I'm going to put on my Cinderella costume. I'm going to dance at a parade. I mean, and I only had enough for the middle. For two, I do 2 warps, A, B, A, B in the middle part here. So I didn't have enough, so I dyed another warp. So this is B, C, B, C. Does that make sense? And wove it up. And I hated it. I really thought, this is garish. And then came back to it about not even a month later and said, you know what? This is good. I like this. I'm going to give it a shot. Give it a shot in complexity. So that's kind of how that happened. Yeah. Happenstance with Fiberworks, right? With yarns that look possible, dyeing it and then saying, oh God, and then saying, oh no, that's okay. And I liken it to baseball. The best hitters in baseball have an average of around 300, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means that they get up to the plate every 10 times, that 7 times they don't get a hit.
Well, you mentioned clunkers. So I have a story for you, okay? I was a docent at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta for years, and I'm giving a tour, and there's a gentleman on the tour who's looking at this artwork that is a very, very famous abstract artist, and he turns to me and he says, this is just paint thrown on a screen. Why is this considered art? Well, first I had to go through the whole thing about, it's color and the arrangement and the texture, trying to explain the whole abstract art thing, right? But then the other thing I brought up to him was that this artist did a whole sequence of paintings to get to this painting, to get to the one that he thought was it. And I was on your blog and I was reading about how you do lots of trial and error. So we have a piece here called Paint 1, Beam 2, where you use 1 warp and you change the weft. And this is a great example of your trial and error process. So can you talk more about doing this and how it affects your work?
Yeah, I think I actually learned this from advertising because I would see my peers and they'd come up with 50 ideas. And I even heard of one advertising agency where they would, for say, copy, I'm talking words now, for a slogan, they'd take a ton of ideas and throw them on the floor in pieces of paper, and people would drop coins to choose which one they liked to go with for the client, right? So for me, profusion of ideas, that's back to baseball again. If I get up to the plate 10 times, I might get hit 3 times. Does that sound crazy? I think that I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, and just sample. And my courses, my workshops have made me do that, because you have to, I try to weave samples for anything I ask people in my workshops to weave, usually. So you want to have a whole bunch of samples. By the way, a tip for looms, table looms. When I got a table loom, all of a sudden I went, this is great for sampling. But I don't just limit it to my table loom. I'll put it on a big loom and just go, 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 go. And there are a lot of clunkers.
What do you do with your clunkers?
They're in the closet, and I keep thinking, I have a closet, and I keep thinking that if I were really, really creative, I would either put them all together in a quilt, or I would make sachets for dear friends, or imagine. But I don't have time, darn it. So they sit there waiting to talk to me, but they don't. I actually, I remember one really gifted felter in our guild, and we actually discussed the idea of having a guild presentation on our mistakes, because I think that's really, 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 really important. I think you learn more from your mistakes than anything else. Yeah. And boy, that by that measure, I must be brilliant, because no, really, you do.
I like the idea of having it as a guild event, because I think and weaving is can be so isolated that you think you're the only one that makes those stupid mistakes. And when you share it with your guild, you all go, oh, I did that. Yeah, I've done that before.
Well, for example, I won't tell you what piece it was, but one of my pieces that was in the Convergence fashion show, it was earlier in my weaving career. I actually took the leaf sticks out before I threaded.
Oh, fun.
And then I stood there and I went, I went to myself, you just took the leaf sticks out. What were you thinking? But fortunately there were stripes, it was stripes in the warp. So yeah, it's amazing. Weaving is very complicated.
It is.
How's that for an
It
axiom?
is.
Yeah.
Well, I want to shift gears here a little bit. You have a wonderful website, and I really enjoy your writing. And this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier. How do you think your writing impacts on your weaving?
Well, it probably makes me try to be more conscientious, because if I'm going to say something, I better do it, In fact, I've been talking about the importance of complementary colors to art and to weaving, and particularly with parallel threaded designs, right? And I thought, wait a minute, you've never really put on a warp with real complementary colors. So I have a warp on right now that is blue and orange. It's not pretty, and it's terrific what it's producing with, Marian Stubenitsky's double weave kind of approach. So it does make me more conscientious, I hope. But it's almost, Kathy, it's almost more useful as a journal. Like I can figure out, oh, wait a minute, how do I replicate that technique again? And I go back and use it that way. It's really useful as a record, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, and it probably is incentive to keep weaving too. To keep, don't lapse, because once a month I say to myself, I'm going to post something on the blog. So it's like, you better be doing something.
Well, I'm really excited to do this. We're going to share something here. We have an image of your very first weaving. If we could show that now, please.
There it is, my bookmark.
Your bookmark.
And rug warp.
Well,
And
you
I hope
started weaving in your 40s. So what impact do you,
45.
45, what
Mhm.
impact do you think starting at that time of your life had on your work? And how do you think your work would be different if you had started, you know, in your 20s instead?
Oh my goodness. I really, 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 really sometimes really envy people who started. You know, I have this. It started in their 20s. I have this feeling like um, I've had three lives. You know, and weaving was the third one. Why? Why didn't I come upon it earlier? Um, so you know, the question of what how different I would be. I think I'd be a much better. I mean, I think I'd be much smarter. I think that there's nothing that can replace the depth of knowledge that you get with weaving for 40 years, 50 years. You know, it's almost innate after a while. You know, you know how four shaft structures work, and you can just build on that. So I have this, maybe it's a fantasy, but I look at the people who've been weaving forever, and they're brilliant. So it's sort of like I feel like I can't intuit a structure. I can't look at a structure and go, aha, that's how it works. You know, I know it, and I can explain that to you, and you know why. Um, so I feel I wouldn't be struggling to understand structures as much as I do. Um, you know, I admire folks who start out early. It's hard to make a living at weaving through, you know, I went into the workforce in a job that was more mainstream. So that's that's a challenge, right? So I'm glad I was able to work. But the thing about weaving is if you're lucky enough to have time to weave, right? It's like it's like self-care, you know? It's good for the soul. And so learning to weave at 45 has been um so gratifying, so fulfilling, you know? I like to think I'm a late bloomer and maybe I brought more attention and focus to it as an older adult, you know? That's possible. That's possible.
Well,
Um,
that's what I was thinking, is that I always think if I could go back and redo my classes in college, I would learn so much more because of my
oh,
experience up to now. So starting weaving at 45, you have all those experiences when you start learning.
yeah. I think of someone like, I mean, Sheila Hicks. You know, she knew she wanted to be an artist from day one. I
Mhm.
mean, didn't she go to Yale or something? And did she weave with wasn't she a weaver with, I see, I haven't, I'm not well versed in her background, but she's an art weaver. She developed her career as a very young person. I mean, extraordinarily gifted. But yeah, I so admire that, you know? But I do what I do, Kathy, and I'm fortunate to do what I do, you know, and start when I did.
And you do it so
So,
well.
well, we all do. I mean, I've seen some weavers who have been weaving for 2 years and they knock it out of the park. So my theory is in a way that our weaving is for us. And I think um, I I think that any art, if you've got if you're writing a song, you know, who are you writing it for? Well, if you write it with your audience in mind, you're not putting your heart and soul into it. If you write it for you, so I like to think we weave for ourselves, you know?
Mhm.
And if somebody else likes it, that's nice. That's a good thing. But
Well, that
even people who sell, yeah.
this kind of leads to my next question, which is we have some images that have inspired your weaving. So, how do you approach designing your work? And if you could speak some to these images.
Okay. You know, some of these interviews, I'm tempted not to tell the truth because
Oh, you can tell the truth here.
No,
It's
no,
a,
I can't tell the truth. It's like Barbara Walters. You know, you're going to make me cry.
yeah.
No, I'm joking. This is that for me. I am not an illustrator. I'm not a designer. I'm not. I can't draw. So I don't do any of those things. But I poke around a lot, looking at the internet, looking at Pinterest, looking at what other weavers are doing, looking at books, you know, looking at photographs. And you know, my advice to anyone who wants inspiration is pay attention. If you like
Ah,
something, look at it again and again and understand yourself why you like it. So those images, that skein of blue silk ribbon, it was, I dyed that, and it was one of those, I don't want to call it chance successes. You know, chance favors the prepared mind. You know, Louis Pasteur said that. So I like to think if you work at something, you know, you're going to have some successes. I love that. I loved it. And I did not know what to do with it. I did not know what to do with it. And it sat there. And I went to a friend's house, and she had this little frame loom sitting on the floor. And she had woven flat weaving tapes,
mm.
green and pink, complementary colors. So they were a mosaic. And I thought, aha, that's the best way to show off that yarn, is not smushing it in warp and weft, but to weave. Well, in my case, I wove it off loom. I used painter's tape and created my warp, and then wove it sitting there. So that created that jacket. Um, but then sometimes it's just, I want to see these colors. I want to see these colors woven. I want to show off. More often than not, for me, it's how can I show off color? Yeah.
Well, that
So
one image was Marc Chagall.
yeah,
Yeah.
Chagall, that was a detail. Now think about Chagall. I mean, he is so often about, and the Impressionists, I mean, come on, the way, the more I know about them, the more I realize the genius of color that they have. So Chagall is always using those wonderful, bold, warm, hot reds and oranges and yellows against the midnight blues and the sky blues and the turquoise. And so when I paint warps, I think of Chagall a lot, and I just use cool and warm colors again and again and again and again, because um, they are so evocative, and he combines them so well. It's contrast, isn't it? So there's that. And then the other thing is the what's that factor. You know, there was an image of a drawdown, you know, on Pinterest, and it was like, what is that? And I tracked the guy down. That was the graphic, the drawdown you saw. It was 24 shafts. I knew it was Echo. He's in France somewhere, and he took a workshop with Stubenitsky. And well, you know what I did? Steal like an artist. You and I have talked about this. I just said, okay, I am going to replicate this design. I'm going to plunk it into Fiberworks. And I had no idea how it worked. So I deconstructed the double weave tie-up because it's very unique. It's I call it carved. It has no ratio. It has no evenness. It changes, and figured it out and redid it. And I asked him, can I adapt this for my own uses? And he said, certainly. So that was a case of steal, but tell the person you're going to steal from them with their agreement. No, I joke a little bit, but it's inspiration from other weavers. How did she do that? Why do those colors work? You know,
Mhm.
and playing around on Fiberworks for hours at a time.
Yeah, we were talking about a book, and if you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to get it. And don't ask me who the author is because I can't remember now, but it's called Steal Like an Artist. And he talks about, you don't steal, you take it and run with it and go the next step. So
Yeah, and I
great
have a
book.
theory that we more often than not, when someone is really truly gifted, you, in a way, you can't steal from them, But you can break down what they're doing and learn from them and apply it to your own work.
Right.
You know, I mean, a rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, why do we have guilds? We have guilds so that we can see what everyone is doing and learn from each other. I mean, that's just how it operates. So I learned probably the most from other weavers. Yeah, most inspiration is from other weavers.
Well,
What's that factor? Yeah.
well, that's kind of my next question is, how do you feed your creativity? How do you stay inspired? And
You know, I did write down an answer to this question when you posed it for me because I have a quote for you. It's by Bruce Springsteen, and he says, creativity is an act of magic that rises up from the subconscious. Isn't that beautiful?
yeah,
And so I was thinking that sometimes you have to rest and let your mind go elsewhere. I was talking to one weaver who says she has her best ideas in the shower, and I was realizing that I have a lot of ideas in the shower, and there are times when they just come, and then there are times when you sit there and wait for them and they don't. So I think I really mean this. Spend a lot of time weaving or working on weaving or thinking about weaving or studying, and then get away from it too.
mm,
So it's kind of so what feeds my creativity? I will tell you again, Kathy, I think it's paying attention to what I like. You know, um, sometimes you don't even realize you're responding to something that is someone wore or someone wove, and you have to monitor your own reactions. Okay, I like Chagall's color combinations. What can I do with them? So it's observation for me mostly that feeds my creativity. And I think most people would say that in a way, right? Yeah.
well, I think for Convergence, I'm going to have a T-shirt made that says "Pay attention," you know, by Denise Kovnat, you know, in quotation marks. You know, you
And they'll
always see
say
the,
she's just a bossy older sister,
no,
you know?
no, no, it's good. Pay attention. That's going to be
Yeah.
my theme. Pay attention.
But you know what I'm saying? Notice the
Yeah, I
details.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, kind of jumping. If you weren't weaving, what other art form do you think you would do?
I'd be singing.
Really?
I would be singing, or I'd be playing the banjo. Yeah. That was my first life was music and yeah, singing. I would be, but um I I see a lot of relationship between weaving and music with rhythm. Some
Mm.
people are synesthetic where they think of music in terms of colors. So yeah, I love singing, and that's just maybe that would be it. But it wouldn't be too lucrative now, would it? You know,
Well, did you study singing or were you
I studied music for a long time and as a child. That same grandparent that my grandma was the knitter and my grandpa was blind also, and he was the piano player. So I would dance and sing with him. So music, yeah, it's and I married a musician. I married a piano player. I can't say that he likes my singing, but he's not listening, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah, but singing definitely.
all right, why don't we ask some questions from the audience? We have a bunch. So the first thing everybody's been asking about is what's behind you. Now you talked about one of those. What are the
Right.
other two artwork behind you?
Okay. See, I don't think I can. No. This. Oh, I am. This is a. Okay. This is. One time I did this and the whole screen fell down, and you don't want to know what's behind that.
Okay.
No, it's my husband's piano and stuff. Okay. This I've always. All right. Shout out to Jan Towsley if she's listening. This is another woman in my guild, and she wove this echo piece in a class I was teaching using silk raffia. No, silk ramie.
Ah,
And it was the freaking coolest crazy. It had this quality of linen, but that grit, you know, and then it had the sheen of silk. So I wanted to do something in silk ramie. So that started that. This is a 16 shaft gin piece, right? And it was done with Chagall colors. And I call it North Star in honor of Harriet Tubman, who, and Frederick Douglass, whose newspaper was in Rochester, New York. So it's a gin design, and I blogged about, at last I found a pattern, and I didn't. It was horrible. So I finally just split the treadling, 8 up, 8 down, 16 shafts, added tabby. Remember, remain calm and add tabby. Remember that? And that is it. And yet, oddly enough, I struggled for a weft. And you know how this goes. I threw in a little bit of silk noil that was a slubby kind of a clay adobe in my stash, and it nailed it. You know, I don't think you ever can predict, right? So that's that. And then this is the piece that you talked about. That's called Burano. And I find after the lace weavers in Italy, you know, this one was 2 painted warps because I had to teach a class, and it's Echo. And then I've noticed Catherine Weber's phenomenal work, and how she will throw accents of stripes in. And ladies and men, she will add a black, just one line of black to outline that stripe. So I tried that. So that's Echo on 12. And I took a pattern from handweaving.net and changed it to Echo. And then this is the Shrep. No, this is not Shrep. This is 22 silk, and it's a boat neck top with silk ribbon as weft in orange. And it's odd because you can't really see the weft, and yet it adds warmth to it. So this was in the Convergence fashion show. Actually, the most recent, 2018, the one where we most recently gathered. Yeah.
Do you sew your own garments, or do you have someone else do that for you?
No, I sew, and I that's a problem. No, it really is. I call myself a free range seamstress. I sew because I want to make a garment, but to me, that's another thing. Now, like Daryl Lancaster's been sewing for 40 years. You cannot replace that level of experience, you know? And it's a whole nother skill set from weaving. I mean, my gosh, we spend so much time learning to weave. So I sew because it's a joy to me that I can even do it, you know? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah.
That I can put a seam down. So yeah, I do, but I long to collaborate with someone, and yet, you know, that's also a real tough thing to do. Yeah.
Well, Debbie Pfister,
I know Debbie.
well, she has a question.
Guild.
She says she noticed that many of your parallel threading and network drafted twill designs are for 8 shafts and larger. They are beautiful. Yes, we all agree. However, she only has 8. She said, can you get a similar effect with just an 8 shaft?
My gosh, yes, 8 shafts. Some of the most beautiful designs are for 8 shafts.
There you go.
Absolutely. I mean, check out page 96, Stubenitsky's Echo and Iris, 8 shafts.
There you go.
Page 96, the best draft in her whole, well, she's got glorious drafts, but 8 shafts, yeah.
I'm going to have to look it up now. All right, somebody else, Amy Sloboda, I pronounced your name wrong, I'm sorry. She was wondering, what is the advantage of a table loom for sampling? And would you recommend one table loom over another?
All right, then the main advantage is that you lift one shaft and you see what happens with that. And then you're able to say, okay, I'm going to change my tie up. You don't have any tie up. You have a direct tie up. So you can sample, sample, sample. I mean, I think that's what Dr. Bateman did all the samples on a table loom. I mean, that's one of the reasons he was so innovative, was he was just playing around this. And I found for a table loom, if you want to learn double weave, that's the way to go, because you learn what's up is down and down is up, and you can see immediately what's going on. Also, you can warp a table loom in a very, very fast amount of time. It's an afternoon as opposed to a big loom, you know?
Mhm.
So, and oddly enough for me, I keep my table loom often on the dining room table. I mean, you know, we all have to make concessions for space. And I'll just pop back and forth sometimes and throw a few shots. It's not like your big loom, you sit down, you turn on the lights, you know, you get your shot, you're ready to go. So a table loom is best for sampling, because mainly because you get a direct result every time you lift one shaft.
So what is your favorite weave structure? Anu Bati. Batia? Ask that.
All of them. No, I would say
Next
really
question.
right now, you know, it's sort of right now. Don't you think for everybody it's a moving target? Um, right now for me, it's double weave with on an extended parallel threading, because you get this extraordinary these color blends. So you've got two colors in the warp, typically, in a parallel threading, A, B, A, B, and then you've got two colors in the weft, and there is no predicting what you're going to get. And so it's just a joy, you know, to see these patterns. And the patterns are extra bold,
Mhm.
right? Because you're weaving one solid layer at a time. So it's quite beautiful.
Laura Womack wants to know, do you dye and what kind of dyes?
Yeah, that's a, oh, that, I do a lot of dyeing. It's instant gratification, you know, right? Weaving, you know, you can start a project and then, you know, 6 months later, you've got, no, I'm joking a bit again, but it takes a long time. Dyeing, you can put something in the dye vat, take it out, and it is transformed. So I love that. I love painting warps because you look like a genius, and all you've done is taken all these different colors. And not all you've done, but um, so I typically use the fiber reactive dyes, because I like to use cottons and cellulose fibers, or the wash fast acid dyes for silk. If I had my druthers, I have used natural dyes. I would shift to natural dyes entirely because of the environmental effects, but it's much harder to paint a warp with natural dyes. I'm still wrapping my head around that. Yeah.
Several people are asking what you weave on
Well,
and how many
um,
shafts that is.
I could say I'm a faithless weaver when it comes to looms. You know, I've had so many looms. I started out with a baby wolf, and then I bought a mountain loom, table loom, 16 shafts. So I had an 8 shaft baby wolf, bought a 16 shaft mountain loom, sold that, bought a 12 shaft tools of the trade, sold that, bought a 12 shaft Maycomber, kept that for a long time. Then I bought a 16 shaft Toika. That is a Cadillac of a loom. So now I have my Toika, which is brilliant, and I have a 16 shaft table loom that is a Purrington. Who is the guy who followed after Purrington? I can't remember his name, but he took the. Anyhow, it's a Purrington like 16 shaft. I have a 12 shaft Voyager, and new to me, I sold my Maycomber, is a 32 shaft Nagato, and I'm really having a great time with that. It's just it's wonderful. So, I mean, my husband and I had to basically, we had to really, really work because it was new to me. It hadn't been used for a while. So we had all kinds of disasters. But anyhow.
Bless him for being there.
Oh, he's an angel. Yeah.
Well, you've hit a nerve with dogs on the loom and clunkers and mistakes. We've got all kinds of comments and questions. And I wanted to, the Whatcom Weavers Guild. Thank you, Whatcom, for sponsoring.
Thank you, Whatcom. That is a wonderful, and in memory of one of their dear members. That's very sweet.
And they have a great idea. This is from Sharon Allen. She said they had a dog trade day, and they came back a month later and showed off what they had done with someone else's cast off. What a great idea.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. I really mean this. We weavers are so, what's the word, punctilious, everything is this way, the math. And then it's like a mistake. I mean, for heaven forbid, a threading error. Well, how do you think Huck was invented? I imagine floats came about through thread. And I don't mean to pass it off as the old cliche about a design element, but I do think mistakes are critical and you have to just fight through them. And sometimes you really have to walk away from the loom, just, okay, you know what? The weaving goddesses are not with me today. Bye. See you tomorrow,
All right, Debbie Pfister asked, do you recommend focusing on a particular portion of weaving to excel? Like do double weave or do tapestry or do dyed warps? I think that's what she's asking.
This is like, this is the philosophy of weaving. I mean, there's so many people who have gone through the COE program, right? Or my certificate of excellence, or people who've gone through the Hill Institute and gotten the master weaver that way, or people who have gone to school for weaving. And I really, really envy that survey approach. I think you really, really hone your technique and your knowledge. I haven't had enough time to do that is my approach. I'm busy following my own nose. So I think this sounds so cliched, but it's almost like you have to do what's right for you. You have to, if you're really, really curious about a structure, follow that, but if you feel you would do much better with a broad background, I mean, I think that's the way to go. So I don't really have a great answer for that. I just do what I get greedy about. I have found though that you know how so many weavers say, I want to try everything, and they're all over the place. I was like that. I tried everything, did everything. And slowly you do kind of home in on something. I found that to be the case with me anyhow.
It's like that saying, my favorite weave structure is the last workshop I took. I'm so excited about this. I've learned about this. So yes, yeah, I think you're right. I think it depends on the person. And what
and what are we doing this for anyhow? Do we have to become experts? I mean, is there such a thing? We're doing this to please ourselves, to share with others, perhaps to sell, to learn, to grow. So, what's your objective also?
Yeah. I do want to mention something else that you talked about with COE, if people are curious about that. That's a certificate of excellence program that Handweavers Guild of America offers. And it's a study program, and then you submit your work and you may get the certificate of excellent awards, and we have a level
well
one.
And so many. I mean, Inga Dam has done this, and Robin Spady. Didn't Robin Spady do it years ago?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so many of our expert weavers and our wonderful teachers, but you have to decide what you want to do. Yeah, what's right for you.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know what you're wearing.
I am wearing a scarf that is a 16 shaft 10-2 cotton 4-color echo draft, similar to the North Star draft. And Marian Stubenitsky says you can't, this is in my Echo course. I have this design, I call it Dharma. She says you can't mirror these designs unless you shift your color order, but I mirrored it anyhow because I kind of, there's symmetry here, but I kind of like asymmetry, if that makes any sense. And you know, a plug about color. Let's see, I'm not holding this right. You know, 4 colors. So it's analogous colors. It's got red, well, yeah, it's got a red, a burgundy, and an orange. And then I threw in a blue in the warp, right? I've got an olive weft, 22 weft, and you could never tell. So, you know, that's one of the takeaways from these designs is that the colors blend in unpredictable ways.
All right. I can't believe this. We're almost done. It's been an hour. I don't know how that happened. Thank you so much.
Because you're a good interviewer.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's what you're doing.
I did have one question. Somebody asked about this little loom back here. It's a toy. Somebody gave it to me. I think it weaves, but it's just a wonderful children's loom. I have no idea who makes it. It was a gift. So sorry, I don't really have any information on that loom. I do want to thank you for being here today. It was so much fun. I hope you'll come back and see us again. If you want to know more about Denise Kovnat, Wonder Weaver, go to her website and do check out her website. She has some wonderful videos on how to. Her blog is so entertaining and so well written. And you can find all that on denisekovnat.com. A special thank you to Watcom Weavers Guild of Bellingham, Washington for sponsoring today's episode of Textiles and Tea. To honor Leslie Comstock, what a lovely gesture from a guild. We weavers are good people. Thank you, Comstock Weavers Guild. If you would like to sponsor a textile tea or your business or your guild, go to the website weavespindye.org and you'll see more information there on how to do that. Textiles and Tea is supported by the generous donations to the Fiber Trust. If you would like to see more programming like this, please support HGA by becoming a member or donating, or both. You can join and donate on our website at weavespindye.org. If you missed part of the program today, or you would like to watch it again, or you want to share it with a friend, please, you can go to the Facebook page, the HGA Facebook page, and because today was recorded and you can watch it there. Just a reminder, you do not have to have a Facebook account to watch the recorded Textiles and Teas, any of them. They're all on there. Next week, we will have tea with Heavenly Bresser. Thank you so much for being here today. It was so much fun. And I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Happy tea.